Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful, creepy human being, you, and welcome to today's true crime episode. I am so happy that you are here. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the murder of Sandee Rozzo. And when I tell you, I think this is going to be one that has a very divisive reaction from those of you who watch it, because wowie. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and be one of us. Now, before we get into the details of today's case, I first need to say a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, and that is Aura, okay? And I need to start this off with a question for you. Well, I don't need to. I would like to start this off with a question for you. And the question for you today is this. Have you ever Googled your name or the name of somebody you love and been surprised to see just how much of yours or their private, personal information was available on one of those public listing sites? Because when I tell you, it is far more common for your private information to get leaked on the web than you realize. And that is because there are these things out there called data brokers who sell your information to people that you really don't want to have it, like spammers and robocallers. They can even find out where you live. I am not down with that sickness. I value my privacy and I value your privacy, and that's why I want to introduce you to Aura. Now, I've got some good news for you and I've got some bad news for you. The good news. Did you know data brokers are legally required to remove your information if you ask them to? It sounds great, right? But here's the bad news. They make it super difficult for you to figure out even which of the data brokers have your information. And that is one of the ways in which Aura comes in. They identify which of those pesky data brokers have your information, and they submit opt-out requests on your behalf. They do the work so that you do not have to. And if you've been here a while, you know I love that. When I first signed up for Aura, one of the very first things I did is I went to the data broker opt-out section on their site because I was curious. I was like, how many of these data brokers could really have my information? And it turns out like 30. And Aura had already submitted the opt-out request on my behalf. Thank you, Aura. They also do things like check and see if your information has been leaked on the dark web. And if you know, you know. First off, I'm sorry. And second, you know that nobody wants their information leaked on the dark web. And they check to see if your passwords that you're using online for sites like your banking are secure. And those are just a couple of ways that Aura protects you and your family from online threats that you simply cannot see. Through just the Aura app, which is super easy to set up, you can get things like parental controls, which I'm going to be needing closer and closer to now, which is insane to me. But you can get that. You can get antivirus. You can get VPN. You can get password management. You can get identity theft insurance and more. And you get it all in one place. You don't need several different apps, and you get it all at one affordable price. It sounds like a great deal to me, but listen, I'm not your mom. I can't tell you what to do, but what I can tell you is that I don't want people to exploit and profit off of your personal information, and you don't have to let that happen. You can let Aura do the hard work for you by helping keep you safe online. And of course, I've got great news for you today. Aura is offering members of the Brat Pack the opportunity to explore all they have to offer for free for 2 weeks through my link. So if all that sounds as good to you as it does to me, make sure to click the link in the description box. It's aura.com/Bratterstein to let them know I'm the one that sent you, because it helps out my channel, and get a 14-day free trial to everything they have to offer and see if your personal private information has been leaked online. And if it has, let Aura help you put a stop to it today. Now, I just want to say a big thank you to Aura for partnering with me on today's video. It's partners like Aura that make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. Now, let's go ahead and get into this video. This video is on a case that was recommended to me by a member of the Brat Pack named Maria. Hi, Maria. Thank you, Maria. And this is a case that I had never heard about prior to getting this suggestion. And let me tell you, now that I know about this case, I cannot believe that I didn't before. And for any of you who are not familiar with this case, let me tell you, you are in for quite the wild and completely tragic ride. Okay, to give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about here, I want to read you a quote from the prosecutor on this case when referring to one of the defendants. The prosecutor said, quote, "It's the kind of thing a book could be written about. They're married one day, and when most people would be on their honeymoon, he's planning to kill someone. So with that quote, today I'm going to tell you the entire story. I read all the things on this case so that you do not have to. And at the end of this video, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it kicking around in your brain as we go through the details of this case. But of course, I want you to answer once we have something to go on. But the question of the day is this. I actually have two. One, who do you believe was the real mastermind behind the murder of Sandee? And two, do you think that the plea agreement that was made here was appropriate? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below after we go through the details of this case. And now with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of Sandee Rozzo. So our case today is going to begin, or at least our discussion about this case is going to begin on July 5th, 2003. It's about 11 p.m. when 37-year-old Sandra Rozzo, who went by Sandee, pulled into the garage of the townhouse where she lived in Pinellas Park, Florida. She was just getting home after working a shift at the Green Iguana, which was a local bar where she worked as a bartender. So that sounds totally normal, right? Getting off of work, driving home, just being very ready to put the day behind you. But this wasn't a normal night, and Sandee did not know that on a night that seemed like every other night to her, she was actually being followed. Apparently, Sandee had been followed and stalked a lot recently, but she just wasn't aware it was happening. But this night was no different from any of the other nights when this happened. This person, well, it was a little different because of what ended up happening here. But this person, dressed in a disguise, followed Sandee home from work. And when she pulled into her garage, into her place of safety, this person ambushed her. This person came up to the car and shot out the driver's side window where Sandee was sitting, obviously because she was driving the car, and then proceeded to shoot her over and over. She was shot 8 times, which one could definitely say was a bit of overkill, especially considering at least one of those shots was to her head and several of the others were to her torso. Now, the night that this happened, Sandee's boyfriend was in the townhouse at the time, and he had actually gone to bed early that night. So he's sleeping, and he says that he did actually hear the sound of the gunshots. But when he heard them, he mistook them for fireworks because, it was July 5th. And anybody who has existed in this country knows that for like the first week, basically all of July is noisy as hell. Like people are like, hell yeah. Freedom, let's go. And they're just shooting off fireworks far past the 4th of July, which if you're not from the US, the 4th of July is Independence Day. Fireworks, boom, in the sky, and it lasts pretty much all month, unfortunately. So he hears these fireworks is what he thinks in his brain and doesn't think much of it and tries to go back to sleep. He doesn't go back to sleep though, because he's laying there and he's awake and he's like, man, Sandee should have gotten home by now. So after a bit of time laying there at about 11:15, he gets up and goes downstairs to try to look for her. He goes downstairs, he goes into the garage and is surprised to find that Sandee's car is there. So why hadn't she come upstairs, right? But then he starts to take in the scene more fully and he realizes that Sandee is still in the car and she's like slumped over the seat. And not just that, but it's clear that something has happened because there's glass everywhere. There's blood everywhere, with one of the first responding officers referring to it as a, quote, tremendous amount of blood. So naturally, 911 was called. Sandee was, of course, rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, she wasn't able to be saved. And so she died that night. Well, that night, but it was really the next morning because it was after midnight. Now, it did not take police long to come up with a suspect in this case. Almost immediately, they sat down with Sandee's boyfriend who had been there that night to ask him about who Sandee was as a person, but also, of course, to ask, who may have wanted her dead. And this is because police were operating under the assumption that Sandee knew whoever had killed her. They did not think this was a random act, and that was mostly just because of the scene. The fact that this person had followed her into the garage, had shot through the window, and had shot over and over, like there were shells everywhere. They just believe that there's no way that this was a random act because it just seemed very much like this person just had it out for her. So an officer is questioning him, and during the interview, the officer described a point in time where it seemed like a light bulb went off in Sandee's boyfriend's head when he realized who was most likely responsible for Sandee's murder. And as police continued to question more and more people in Sandee's life, they thought that they were really onto something because everyone was saying the exact same person. And this person that everybody thought was responsible was an ex-boyfriend of Sandee's named Timothy Alvin Humphrey, who went by Tracy. And long story short is Tracy had horribly assaulted Sandee during their relationship, which we will get more into that later. But basically, Sandee had reported the assault, and she and Tracy were going to be going to trial over this assault, with Sandee being the star witness in the case against him. And the trial was set for August 4th, 2003. So just about a month after she was killed. So the timing of it all, the motive, it was all seeming very suspicious, and police really believed that Tracy was likely responsible for Sandee's murder. But here's the problem. He had a rock-solid alibi. So with that, police were left scrambling with the question of who killed Sandee Rozzo. But before we answer that, let's try to dip our toes into answering the question of who was Sandee Rozzo. Sandee Rozzo was born January 17th, 1966 to her parents, Frank and Shannon, who also went by Sandee, it appears, and she was born in Homestead, Pennsylvania. Sandee was said to be an outgoing young woman who had a zest for life and had dreams of becoming a model, having done modeling on and off since high school, and had huge dreams of making it in the movie business. She really wanted to be an actress. Which, being an actress, that makes a lot of people have that dream. I even had that dream as a youth. You'd be surprised to hear it. Maybe, I think if you knew me in person, you'd be more surprised to hear that. But here's the thing. I found out very quickly at my first audition that stage fright was a real part of my personality. So that wasn't really the move for me. But for her, it seemed like the total fit, like it's something she really wanted. And look at her. Like, she was so clearly beautiful naturally, but she was also the type of person who put a ton of work into her appearance. She was very big on going to the gym. She went all the time. She worked out and lifted weights several times a week. And she was very big on taking care of her body, with her mother even saying of this, quote, "She had the body, the face. She was perfect." So Sandee just seemed to have a happy life with a lot going for her. She had a job. She was doing her modeling. She was also a mama, which how any person can wear so many hats is beyond me. But she did. She had a 13-year-old daughter who lived with her father, but who Sandee reportedly loved and doted on. And she was just at a point in her life where she personally wanted to find Mr. Right. She'd been married before and that hadn't worked out. So she was trying. And it's not that she had a lack of options, because again, look at her. She was beautiful. Imagine that woman was your bartender. It would be very difficult for you not to fall in love with her, which, is what she wanted. Maybe not so much having random dudes who were patrons at the bar fall in love with her, but she wanted the right guy to fall in love with her. And it seemed that had happened for her shortly before she was killed. So before her death, she had moved into the townhouse where she was killed. And this was on 66th Way. And she actually moved in with her boyfriend, a boyfriend she had dated before or had broken up with, but then had realized that she still loved and got back together with. So she was looking forward to the future, having no idea that somebody from her past was going to come and steal that future. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the night she was murdered, which is honestly such a sad night to talk about. I read some things from coworkers and friends with hers at the Great Iguana who just said she was in such a good mood that night. She left happy and smiling and giving everybody hugs. It was just because this did happen to her. She was killed. She was shot over and over and over. And reportedly, it was so bad that her family had to have a closed casket saying that Sandee would never have wanted anyone to see her that way. But when police questioned Sandee's boyfriend, her mother, her friends, everybody kept saying that there was one particular person who would want to see Sandee that way. And that was her ex, Tracy Humphrey. So with that, Tracy. When one of Tracy's close friends, a very close friend actually, we'll get all into how close he was with this friend later. Well, when this friend was asked about Tracy, they said of him, quote, "Tracy Humphrey? Men were intimidated by him, women all over him. Tracy. If he would see a pretty woman walk in, he'd open the rope, and there she goes." So Tracy Humphrey was born November 15th, 1966. A Scorpio, which we do not claim him because well, a lot of reasons, but one of the things is he was kind of a dick, and not kind of a dick. He was a huge dick. He was the type of person to have been said to be a very good and very convincing pathological liar. He would lie about things to make himself seem more impressive, like by saying that he was a bodyguard for Tom Cruise or that he was Vin Diesel's stunt double. He said that he once played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which I didn't look up, but I assume is football. And he also said that he starred in the Rose Bowl games, which again, I didn't look up, but again, I assume is football. I am not one for the sports balls. Moving on, though, he also said that he was a model, that he used to model Armani underwear in Italy, which none of this was true, by the way, despite the fact that he constantly bragged about himself. And I guess he was the type of person that people just believed. Like, women found him charming, and he seemed to have several women on the hook at once at any given time, which is quite unfortunate because it's not just that he was a liar, which is already like a big, just a no. I don't know about you, but that's like a huge no for me. But he was also dangerous. So he was a violent, dangerous liar. He had a long criminal history, a record of committing several crimes from motor theft to kidnapping to aggravated assault. And most of his violent crimes, of course, were committed against women. And many of the women he dated said that, yes, he was very abusive, with one woman even saying that he tied her up with nylon stockings, shoved a sock in her mouth, and then held a gun to her throat. Now, unfortunately, Sandee did not know this. She didn't know about his violent history when she met him in 2001. The two met at Club Inferno, which was a nightclub in the YBOR city, which is in Florida. Tracy had gotten hired as a doorman because boy was ripped. He was like hella into steroids, allegedly. And Sandee worked as a bartender serving drinks in the VIP section of the club for the people with all the stacks on stacks on stacks. He said that she caught his attention right away, and she was just like such a fun person to be around, and that she was not like most people that he knew. The two met, and Tracy was actually new to the area. He didn't have a lot of friends. He didn't know a lot of people. So Sandee made a point of befriending him, spending time with him, and taking him around to introduce him to the people that she knew to make him feel included. As time went on, though, the two started spending more time together, and they found that they were attracted to each other and had a lot in common with one another. Like Sandee loved to go to the gym. She loved to work out. And Tracy, who we've already discussed was a big old buff steroid dude, was a top personal trainer. So the two just naturally gravitated towards each other. And with time spent together, they started to form a bit of a relationship. And it's just that he seemed to be the type of person who could really put on a mask and hide who he was from you, with a lot of people who knew him but didn't know him like intimately, saying that he was a good guy and even a gentle guy, which we know couldn't be farther from the truth. And Sandee, unfortunately, would learn that because the people who thought he was nice and gentle were those who knew him but didn't know him intimately. So people who were in a relationship with him ended up getting a different side from him. And it did not take long for things between him and Sandee to totally take like a hard left turn. So they meet in November, they start dating, and by New Year's Eve, he had started to show his true colors. Now, what exactly happened that night, I can't say for sure. I know that they worked a shift together, and that during this shift, Sandee did something that he felt like disrespected him. So in response, he freaks out, he makes a scene, and then he proceeds to blow up her phone, calling and leaving like 23 messages on her answering machine, which one could say is a little bit of unhinged behavior. Now, what happened to make him do this again? I don't know. The only person who's really said, or at least the only reporting I could find from somebody who said what happened, was Tracy himself, and I don't really trust what he says. But something he did say that I do believe that he would do is that after this, and after she wouldn't return his calls, he went out and started hooking up with other girls, and even proceeded to like bring the other girls around and parade girls he was hooking up with in front of Sandee just to piss her off. The whole thing just seemed very dramatic. And what's so unfortunate here is that it seems like Sandee did have some good instincts initially when it came to this situation and his reaction to her, because she did meet with an attorney to go over her options, but ultimately decided not to do anything about it and instead made up with him. She was even the one to call him and apologize, and they started to see each other again. And they ended up getting in this cycle where things would be good, and then he would be a humongous dick, and she'd try to leave, and then he'd love bomb her into staying, and it would just go like that over and over and over. Though, if you were to ask him, he would say he was the one who wanted to break things off, but that he felt like he couldn't lose a good thing. So he was the one who felt pressured into coming back and being in that relationship. But I get the vibe that it was more on his end, that he was trying to keep things going. Like, okay, for example, this whole thing happened on New Year's Eve, and 2 weeks later, Sandee received this big package from Victoria's Secret with all this stuff that he had gotten for her to try to patch things over. So they patch things over. And then just a couple weeks later, they're out together at a restaurant and they get in a huge fight, and he gets super pissed because he thinks that Sandee is flirting with some guy who's at the restaurant. So they're fighting. They end up leaving the restaurant and they're still fighting. And he ends up going back to the restaurant and threatening the guy that he thought Sandee was flirting with. And this wasn't the only time that he was violent in his relationship with Sandee, which now brings us to what police believe was the motive for her murder. So it was February of 2002, right? Yeah, they met in 2001. So yeah, it would have been February of 2002. And again, Sandee had tried to end the relationship with Tracy. She had realized that she was still in love with her ex. She wanted to pursue that relationship, but it didn't happen immediately. So her and Tracy were still kind of seeing one another. So one night, the two had gotten together, they were drinking, and they started to fight like they often did. But this time, Tracy went even further than usual. According to Sandee, he beat her, punching her several times in the face. He spit on her. He tore her pajamas off. He tied her up. He squeezed her head between his legs while straddling her. And then he raped her, threatening to kill her and threatening to kill her daughter. So as I'm sure you can imagine, she was absolutely traumatized by this experience. She was terrified. She did not know what to do. And because of this, she didn't report it right away, which is something that is pretty common in situations like this. She only got the strength to do so after 5 days. Now, because it had been 5 days, there was no DNA or medical evidence to prove that it even happened, which is so frustrating. But because of this, they charged him with the lesser crime of assault, which carried a max of 10 years if he was convicted, which is just frustrating and wild because the officers even said it was very clear that she had been beaten up, like she had marks on her and she had a black eye. Now, he denies this, right? He denies that anything bad happened between them and said that he was surprised when he got arrested because he had done nothing wrong. He said that he and Sandee had an intense, passionate relationship and that they had consensual, violent sex often, that this was their thing and it was totally normal for them most of the time. He did acknowledge, however, that the black eye was a bit much, but his excuse for it happening is that he was swinging around a pillow, hit her in the eye, and she fell out of the bed. He literally just said that this all came from a violent pillow fight. Now, this excuse was not as effective as he was hoping that it would be, and he was arrested. And as I said, he was going up against 10 years in prison, which is not enough time for what he is being accused of doing. But to him, that was a terrifying amount of time. Reportedly, he was petrified of going back to prison. As I said, he had been in jail before, and he had said that he was never going back. He had told his friend Hector that he would kill himself before going back to jail. And it wasn't just Hector that he told this to. He told several people throughout his life that he would do anything to stay out of jail, which I would say that maybe then we try to stop committing crimes. That's like one of the best ways to stay out of jail, no? So now here we are, a month before the trial, and the only person who can have him put back in jail has been murdered, which, by the way, did get his charges against Sandee dropped because she wasn't here to testify against him. And here he is, the only suspect in Sandee's murder, because everyone loved Sandee. So naturally, as soon as they hear his name, they want to go and talk to him. But once they do, they run into their first huge problem with Tracy, and that is his alibi. He tells police the day that they come to talk to him that he had an alibi. He was hanging out with a friend of his named Toby, and if they wanted, he would give them Toby's information so they could confirm it. He also said that he had ordered a pizza that night, so he had the receipt for this pizza to show that he was home, and that if they wanted, they could talk to the pizza delivery guy to confirm this as well. And from there, he decided to stop talking. He refused to say anything else to police. So police do just what he said, and they confirm his alibi. They talk to the pizza delivery driver, and the pizza delivery driver's like, oh yeah, I went to this house where this guy lived, and I delivered a pizza to this big old bald guy. And they showed him a picture or whatever, and he confirmed that, like, yes, it was Tracy. And at the time that the pizza was delivered was right about the moment that Sandee was being killed, so he couldn't have been the one that did it. They also looked into his cell phone records, and they were able to see that at the time that Sandee was being killed, his phone pinged off of a tower that was just like a mile away from his house. So again, he couldn't have physically done it. But it's funny that cell phone records helped, confirm his alibi in the beginning, but they also help bring him down later. But don't worry, we're going to get into that. Before all that, though, in the early days of this investigation, police were just like, shit, because their prime suspect clearly was not Sandee's shooter. But that's not to say that looking into Tracy was a total waste, because in looking into Tracy, they started looking at somebody who was close to Tracy. And this was his new wife. And by new wife, I mean new wife. They were married. They were married the day before Sandee was killed on the 4th of July. And this girl was 20-year-old Ashley Humphrey. So Ashley Humphrey was born Ashley Laney on October 13th, 1982, which made her significantly younger than her husband, Tracy. Now, there is a good amount of information on Ashley out there just because people are pretty fascinated with her when it comes to this case. I guess because she's this pretty young girl who got involved in something this horrible. And because prior to this, despite coming from like a rough beginning, she had never gotten into like any trouble. She was said to be just like a good kid. Ashley had grown up with her grandmother because her mother had substance abuse issues and wasn't able to care for her. And her father had been arrested when she was like super, super young. He was actually arrested and was in jail for sexual battery. So he too wasn't involved in her life. I guess her mother was involved in her life, but not in any sort of parental or maternal way. That was all Ashley's grandma. Sadly, though, Ashley's grandma actually died while she was in high school. And somehow, despite this huge trauma happening at such like an important time in her life, she didn't let it affect her negatively. She still was able to complete high school. She graduated high school with honors and then went on to go to college. Though college was a bit of a different experience for her. Like the girl who had done so well in high school seemed to fall on her face a little bit in college and dropped out after just, I believe, one semester. It might have been even less than that. And after that, she moved to Pinellas Park, Florida, which is where Sandee lived. Once she moved there, she got a job to take care of herself, obviously, because she's on her own. And it was at a smoothie shop called Smoothie Planet. And this was directly across the street from the gym where Tracy worked as a personal trainer. So in the fall of 2002, he and Ashley met because she went to his gym. She signed up. They got to talking, and he ended up actually giving her like personal training lessons for free because he was like, she's kind of hot. Let's hang out, I mean, I don't know for sure, but that's what I'm assuming. The two started to date, and they both said that it was good. Tracy saying that he was taken with Ashley right away because she was nice, she was fun, and she was, quote, eager, very eager, which I find to be gross. But they hit it off. She didn't have like the same, how would I word this? Her friends thought it was weird. They thought that he was gross and that he was a, quote, child molester because he was even pursuing her because she was like barely legal, but she was technically legal. So how you feel about that is how you feel about that. But they were just very different in general. To look at them, like, he was humongous next to her. He was like a giant monster. He was like 7 inches taller than her and 100 pounds more than her. So they definitely had a weird look with him being so much larger and so much older. But I mean, if they didn't go on to do horrible things together, some people would still think it's weird, but it wouldn't be weird like it is in this context. So again, they were dating and they seemed happy. And in the beginning, it was more casual. They were dating other people, but as far as she was concerned, she was monogamous in terms of like only sleeping with him. But eventually this morphed into them being in an actual relationship, being exclusive. And Ashley was reportedly stoked, but she was one of the only people that was. Friends noticed that when with Tracy, Ashley was changing. Her friends said that she started pulling away from like a lot of them. She quit her job to work with Tracy, even opening a personal training business with him. And a friend of hers said of this, quote, "I knew something was wrong because she wasn't the normal Ashley. He definitely took over her life. You could just tell that Ashley, there's something wrong with her." And it wasn't just that. There were also rumors that her friends were hearing that Tracy was cheating on her. There was, the word on the street, down the grapevine, you heard about other girls. And it seems like Ashley had heard about this too, but she wouldn't hear it. Okay. Like, when you're in love, there's just some things that you don't want to hear. And that's what her friend said, that she just chose not to listen to anyone. And it honestly is a real shame, because I do think in this situation, if the relationship had just ended, that this probably would not have happened, or at least that Ashley probably would not have been involved in what happened here. And she has even said that in hindsight, she could see, in her opinion, that he was controlling her. Now, whether you believe that or not, that's totally up to you. I don't even know for sure what I believe when it comes to this case, but she has said that he was very controlling of every aspect of her life, that she wasn't allowed to go anywhere without telling him, and that she wasn't allowed to have any friends. And it was more than just that. She said that he would beat her and he would threaten her to keep her around. But regardless of all of that, the relationship moved forward and the two even moved in together. And once they moved in together, this is when Tracy says that he decided to tell Ashley about the pending long prison sentence he was facing for the assault against Sandee. Now, can you imagine being this girl, meeting this guy, falling in love with this guy, moving in with this guy, and then he's like, by the way, I may have to go to jail for 10 years because of this bogus assault charge against me from my ex. Jesus. But she believed him. She trusted him. She thought he was telling the truth. And I think one of Ashley's friends said it best when she said that Ashley just found a way to hate Sandee. So anyways, police learned that Ashley exists, and they're like, so he has a wife that he just married a day before the murder. And not to shade anyone's choice of wedding, but it wasn't even like a wedding. They literally got married at the gym where they worked between clients. There was no minister, there was no rings, there was nothing. And then after the wedding, they celebrated by going out to a dinner at the Cheesecake Factory, which some may argue is a crime committed in itself. And police also noticed that the couple had been together less than a year. So they're just kind of sitting back and they're like, they want to look into Ashley. But when they do, they encounter another problem. And that's because you remember when Tracy told police that he had an alibi, and that said he had been at his apartment with Toby and they were eating pizza, etc. Well, this is what Ashley tells them too, that she had been there that night as well. So basically what happened is, after police tried to question Tracy and he was basically like, oh, fuck you, I'm not talking anymore, police went to the apartment that he shared with Ashley and interviewed a very nervous Ashley. And by very nervous, I mean she literally threw up twice during the interview. Or excuse me, I just confirmed with my notes, she almost vomited twice during the interview. So police ask her everything. They ask her about the relationship. They ask her about the night of the murder, the wedding. And she tells them that yes, she had just recently been married, that the two did not go on a honeymoon, that instead they just went to the beach to celebrate. And that the night of Sandee's murder, she had been at her home with Tracy and Toby, and that they had ordered pizza and that everything was fine. And then she gave them Toby's name and phone number and everything so that they could confirm it for themselves. And I guess from what I read, this was the end of the interview, that it promptly ended because Tracy came home, saw that they were questioning Ashley, and lost it. He was reportedly so pissed off that his head turned like red and purple. Which I don't know if you've ever seen a bald, angry white man, but that absolutely happens. Just a red old purple-headed, angry old bitch. But anyways, when police left the house after that interview, they looked at each other and they're like, yo, that girl definitely knows something. But here's the problem. Police talked to Toby, and initially Toby told them that yes, Tracy and Ashley were both with her the night Sandee was killed. But there was a problem with Toby's story, and this problem became apparent when police looked at the cell phone records. Because you remember how Tracy's cell phone records and the pings proved that he was near the house. They helped him. Well, Ashley's cell phone records absolutely destroyed her alibi. When they got these cell phone records, it was very, very clear that Ashley and Toby were not telling the truth. And that's because Ashley's cell phone on the night of the murder was pinging in a lot of very suspicious places, like pinging off of a tower next to Sandee's work while Sandee was working her shift, pinging at a tower between Sandee's work and her home at the time that Sandee would have been driving from work back to her house, and pinging off of a tower right by Sandee's house exactly at the time that Sandee was being murdered. So police know something's up, and it did not take them long to get absolute confirmation of this. And this was actually from Toby. So I guess her conscience got, I don't know if I mentioned Toby was a lady. Lady Toby got an attack of conscience. And just a couple of days after lying, she actually came to the police department and came clean. And she told them that she could not confirm that Ashley was there that night. That she actually couldn't confirm that anyone was at that apartment that night because she wasn't there. They had lied and used her as an alibi, and she was just too scared to tell the truth. She literally just said that she had went along with it. And with learning this, police are like, oh, damn. Oh, yes. Oh, bam. Bing, bang, boom. We are on to something. So they start really, really looking at this couple, and more specifically, really looking at Ashley, because at least with Tracy, his cell phone records and the pizza delivery guy did give him an alibi. Now, the first tip that police got that really started to help paint a picture about what happened here is going to seem kind of random at first, but don't worry, I'm going to get there. And basically, this tip came from the fire department, who had heard about Ashley's potential involvement with a murder case. How they heard? I have no idea, but they heard. They heard it, and they came out. Apparently, the fire department told the investigators who were investigating Sandee's murder that Ashley had recently had a car of hers stolen and set on fire. So about, was it 6 months? No, it wasn't. About a month before the murder, the fire department were dispatched to this place for a burning car. And basically this car was Ashley's car, which was a Beetle, I believe, a Volkswagen. And she had reported it stolen. So they get to the scene, they find this car that was reported stolen has been set on fire. And even though it was reported stolen, police were kind of like, or the fire department was like, I don't think so. I think this is bullshit. And it was actually being investigated as an arson case. They thought something sketch was happening. So because of this, it got, transferred to investigators, and they did a background check on her. And in doing a background check on her, they found that she had been looking up and purchasing some weird things. And it looked weird at that time. And now it looked super weird when looked at under the, the context of Sandee's murder. Basically, she had purchased a couple of pieces of computer software that made it possible for her to look people up and get information on them. What a different internet it was 20 years ago, which is why I'm always telling you guys about Aura. But basically what happened here is that she had bought this computer software program, and she paid for it with a credit card. So it was traceable, and she paid to look up Sandra Rozzo. On top of that, police spoke to the co-signer on Ashley's car, the one that had been set ablaze. And this was Ashley's mom's boyfriend, and his name was David. So they're talking to him about all kinds of stuff. But since now they're kind of talking to him about, Sandee's murder, they're talking to him with that in the back of their minds. They ask him, if he owned any guns, if he used any guns. And he said that he used to, but not anymore because he had loaned it to Ashley. Now, this was huge because they were able to get shell casings from the gun that David had owned, the one that he no longer had because Ashley had it. I don't know where these shell casings were, if they were in his yard or what, but they were able to get these shell casings. And they compared it against the shell casings taken from Sandee's murder scene, and they were a match. So with that, 5 months after Sandee was murdered, police believed that they had enough to make an arrest. And not just one arrest, but 2. That whole time, the police had basically been piecing together a case against Ashley. And not just Ashley, but Tracy as well. They were getting the phone records. They were getting the information from Toby. They also had the video footage, which, did I even mention the video footage yet? I don't think I did. But basically what happened is after Toby came to police and told them like, hey, sorry I lied, like that sucks. They were like, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have you meet with Tracy and Ashley and we're going to record it. And that's how it's going to be. Now, I don't know how they convinced her to do this. Maybe they were like, you did lie to police. So either you do this or a right to jail. But either way, she does do it. She meets with them and the police are on the sideline recording the whole thing. And during this interaction, Tracy tells her that she needs to keep lying. And she tells them that she had spoken to police and that police told her, a bunch of information. And basically she told them all that the police had so far, which was basically a bunch of shit against Ashley and that they were moving in on her. And this was an attempt to sort of shake them and freak them out. And it was definitely successful because Ashley is seen on this video freaking out and Tracy is seen consoling her. And man, I can only imagine how stressful and scary this situation was for Toby, which is why I think maybe she was threatened just a smidge, because she said that she had been told by Tracy previously that if she went against him and said anything to the police, he would kill her. Anyways, in addition to all that, police also had credit card statements. And in looking in the credit card statements, they were able to see that there's a purchase made to a gun range. So they speak to the people at the gun range, and they're able to confirm that yes, Ashley was there with Tracy, and Tracy was there teaching her how to use the gun. And they also had the fact that Ashley had told her mother that this wasn't the first time that she had tried to shoot Sandee, that there had been another attempt, which we are going to talk about. Don't worry. But police had a good amount. So it's December 18th, just days before Christmas, and Ashley and Tracy are at the gym like they always were, when 28 police officers from local and federal agencies roll up to the gym. Ashley said that when this happened, she saw them through the window because, like, if you've ever been to a gym, there's a lot of big windows so you can see out. And she said as soon as she saw this, she knew they were fucked. And she was right because police came in and both of them were taken into custody. Tracy was charged with a federal firearms violation for being at the gun range with Ashley while on parole, when that's a big no-no. And initially he was held in Hillsborough County without bail, like the jail without bail. And this was the only thing they could arrest him on at this point because they didn't have proof that he was involved in the murder yet. And as for Ashley, she was taken to the Pinellas County Jail to await her trial for her first-degree murder charge. But on the way to the jail, police did try to talk to her. They wanted to try to get some information out of her. They figured that she was the weaker link in the relationship and that she'd be able to give them what they needed to charge Tracy with the murder. So they started to push her. They told her, like, we know he was involved. We know it's not all your fault. We know he's manipulative. You need to come clean with us or your life is over. You're this young woman. There will be no more trips to the mall. No more trips to the mall. No more gym. Nothing. Like, this is it for you. So they tried. They did what they could, but she asked for a lawyer. And they told her, like, listen, you are the only way that we're going to get him. And if you don't, he's going to turn on you. And he's going to let you rot in jail. But still, she was like, lawyer, please. Thank you. Direct quote. Maybe. But things would change. And this is where the drama comes in. There was already drama. But this part, I was like, this is some shady, not shady police work. Just you'll hear. Okay, so about 6 weeks after Ashley was arrested, she decides that she's going to help police. And this is after they come to her with some information. And they're like, hey, did you know everything he's ever told you was a lie? Did you know that he has been physically abusive to many women, that he's talking to women behind your back while you guys are in jail? He's writing to other women. And did you also know that he is bisexual and is having an affair with your hairdresser? which her hairdresser was Tracy's very good friend, Hector. Remember I mentioned in the beginning, his very good friend, Hector? Well, Hector was spoken to about this, and he was like, by, after, whatever. And Hector was like, oh, like, I just assumed that Ashley knew. So this was true. This happened. Which is like, fine, right? Like, being bisexual, go off with your bisexual self. But when you're lying to your partner and hiding it and cheating, that's a problem. And this was also 2002, and I don't know how she was, but the climate was just so, so, so different. It's always been different, particularly when it comes to men who aren't totally straight. You know what I mean? We've all heard, you know what I'm saying. But so she hears this and she decides, like, it's time to help the police, because I mean, he's been lying the whole time. He's been lying to her. And just like police said, as soon as he was arrested, he turned on her. He denied any involvement. He said it was all Ashley and that she did it all herself because she was just so in love with him. And he even said of this, quote, essentially, she would lose everything if she lost me. I told you, she had a bad life. She struggled, and now we were starting a business together. She was an equal partner. If she lost all that, she goes back to mom and the trailer park life. But she sounds like a real prince, no? But Ashley was like, no, that's not the reason this happened. I didn't do it because I was afraid to lose him because of like the life he gave me. I was afraid to lose him because I loved him. Like, she said that the two, when the idea of him going to jail came up, they did discuss options. They even discussed a suicide pact because she loved him and she thought he loved her too. I mean, they even got tattoos for each other. Really tasteful, tribal tramp stamp tattoos. Which, why are those coming back? Why are they coming back? But anyways, she told police that yes, she did do it, but that she did it because he asked her to, or rather kind of forced her to. She said that one night he beat her until she was unconscious. And when she woke up, she was defeated, and she told him that she would do whatever he wanted her to do. She just told him, like, I want you to stay. I want you to stay. I'll kill Sandra for you. She talked to police for hours, and she told them everything. And I mean everything. She even told them that this attempt, this successful attempt at murdering Sandee wasn't even the first time that they had tried to kill her. She said the first time that they tried to kill her was actually in the spring. And she said that it was Tracy who planned it, that Tracy planned the murder of Sandee, that Tracy planned the stalking of Sandee, that Tracy taught her how to use a gun and taught her that it was important to wear disguises so she wouldn't be caught. So during her first attempt, Ashley dressed in a disguise, which is very upsetting to say the least. She wore baggy pants, baggy clothes, wore shoes that were too big, put a hood to hide her hair, and then painted her face dark. She literally did blackface to go out and attempt to kill Sandee so that if she was successful and anyone saw her, they would think that a black man was responsible for the murder. Moving on. She stole a rifle from her mother's boyfriend, like from their house. She got in her car, the Beetle, and she drove to the Green Iguana where Sandee worked to wait for her to get off work. Once Sandee got off work, Ashley pointed the rifle at her, and she had actually wrapped it up in a pair of jeans so that anybody looking wouldn't see a gun. Like, it wouldn't look weird to anybody, which I would say that a stiff pair of jeans being held out the window of a car would be odd to me, but this is what she did. She aimed and she shot at Sandee, but she was not an experienced shooter. So she didn't aim it up quite right. And instead she shot her own car. She shot the side mirror of her Beetle. Now Sandee heard this. She did hear it and she even ducked because of the noise, but she didn't realize what it was. She didn't realize it was a gunshot. She didn't realize that it was aimed at her. So she just left. The only reason we even know that this happened is because Ashley told us, because again, Sandee had no idea. Now, realizing there was a bullet hole in her car's mirror, Ashley freaks out. She tells Tracy, he freaks out, and they together decide that the best course of action would be to report her car stolen and then set it on fire, because they couldn't very well go forward with their plan and then have police, investigating Sandee's murder later and see that there's a bullet hole in Ashley's car. Like, that looks suspicious. So they do just that. They light the car on fire. We already know that story. But apparently after this happened, I forgot his name because he's so unimportant. Tracy was pissed and told her, like, don't think just because you failed this attempt, you're out of doing this. You will try again and you will succeed. So it's the next attempt. Ashley gets a gun. This time she doesn't steal a gun. She actually goes to her mother's boyfriend and asks to borrow one, saying that she was scared because she was being stalked. And he agreed. He let her take the gun. According to Ashley, instead of going on her honeymoon, because again, remember, this is the day after her wedding, she instead decided she was going to go and murder Sandee Rozzo. Following Tracy's instructions, she took the gun. She got in the car, which I believe was a rental, and while wearing her disguise with the black paint on her face, a beard, I think she had the hood on again, completely disguised herself. She drove over to the Great Iguana hours before Sandee was scheduled to get off work and just waited for her during that time, all the while calling Tracy and discussing with him what was going on. Now, I guess Ashley had a rough time sitting there waiting for Sandee. Like, her beard, it wouldn't stick. What a tragedy. Tragedy and travesty is what was happening there. Basically, the beard wouldn't stick and she was getting tired. But that makes sense. She was sitting there a long time. I saw a report say that she sat there for 7 hours. So eventually, she actually fell asleep in the car. She was terrible at the job that she was given. I will say that. I mean, she did go through with it. So that's fucking so frustrating. It just sucks that she didn't suck in a more substantial way. But she falls asleep in the car. She wakes up at about 11 and realizes that Sandee has already said goodbye to everybody and has left, which completely ruined their plan because their plan was to shoot her in the parking lot at work. But now they couldn't do that because Ashley fell asleep. So because she missed her, she instead followed Sandee home. She said as she followed Sandee, she called Tracy and told him what was going on, told him that she was behind Sandee and that it would be over soon, that she would call him when she was done. So she follows Sandee. She sees Sandee pull into her garage and she gets out to kill her. And she said of this, and I quote, "I followed her into the garage and butted my gun on the window to try and break it, but it didn't. So then I shot at the window to break it and then shot at her several times." And she said that Sandee was kicking and screaming with every shot. She said that she had shot Sandee so many times because Tracy told her to. She said that Tracy told her to make sure to aim and make sure to hit vital organs because they didn't want her to be able to talk from a hospital bed, and that he wanted her to shoot her so many times because these bullets were small and wouldn't do as much damage. After she believed that Sandee was dead, she did the next thing that Tracy told her to do, and that was to look into Sandee's eyes and confirm that she was dead. Ashley says that Tracy told her there would be a different look in her eyes once she was gone because her soul would have left her body. And Ashley says that she did this, that she looked into this woman's eyes that she had just shot, and she said she will never forget the look in Sandee's eyes in that moment. Which, honestly, good. I don't think she should be able to. She then left. She got back in the car and she called Tracy to tell him 2 things. 1, that it was done, and 2, that she wanted pizza. She told him specifically that she wanted double cheese, chicken, and tomatoes, but he told her that she couldn't have that because he had already ordered the pizza. Now, I'm telling you this, even though it does not matter at all, because it's information that I now know, and now you have to know. So I always find it so bizarre when people can just go and eat after doing something like this. I know you gotta eat, but I just feel like I wouldn't be hungry. And I'm a bitch who loves pizza. Maybe not that particular order of pizza, but I love a pizza. But if I'm doing something like that, I don't think I'm going to be eating said pizza or even thinking about said pizza. I don't know, man. Anyways, she told police all of this, and in addition to that, she was also able to take them to the place where she had disposed of the weapons. The rifle from the first murder attempt, and the gun from the actual murder. She was able to take them to where they were, and they were able to recover them. Now, Ashley didn't just give all this information from the goodness of her heart. Basically, it was a trade here, right? She wanted to make a deal. They needed her in order to nail Tracy, and she needed them in order to not get the death penalty, which is what she was up against. I mean, we are in Florida here, right? And you don't fuck around in Florida, or actually, notoriously, you do fuck around in Florida, apparently, or at least that's the impression I get from Florida Man, which is a wealth of information. Anyways, after giving this information, she was moved to another county's jail for protection, which is good for her, but also good for police, because if anything was to happen to her, she's not going to be especially useful to them, not being dead. Like, if something happened to her in jail and she died, she wouldn't be able to testify for them. So then Tracy wouldn't get put into jail. And they were feeling pretty confident that Tracy was the type of guy who would go as far as hurting or murdering a woman to keep her from testifying against him at trial. Isn't it ironic? I didn't even think about this until this moment, but isn't it ironic that he had Ashley murder Sandee to stop her from testifying against him at trial, which would have gotten him 10 years. And now Ashley was testifying against him in the murder trial, which is going to get him significantly more. That's what I say to Tracy. But anyways, because she was giving police this information and agreeing to testify against Tracy, she was going to be given a reduced sentence of just 25 years and a reduced charge of second-degree murder. So with that, she agreed to take that deal, saying that she wanted people to know that Tracy was the mastermind. And with that, he was charged with the first-degree murder of Sandee Rozzo, even without being the person to physically pull the trigger. Now, people, as I'm sure you can imagine, were shocked to hear this just across the board. Well, not across the board, because those who knew and loved Sandee weren't that surprised. Like, her mother said that she immediately knew that Tracy was involved. The only thing about the situation that surprised her was that he wasn't the one to actually pull the trigger. But when it came to people who knew Ashley and Tracy, they were shocked. They were like, how could this happen? Because they had different ideas of who they were as people. Like, their landlord, for example, was like, Tracy was always polite. He was always sweet. He was always gentle. And as far as Ashley, she said that she was just a funny, sweet, bubbly, like, little girl. And honestly, this was like the general consensus when it came to Ashley, period. Everyone who knew her was just like, what the fuck? Because she was very well liked. She was this typical little girl who had recently graduated and went rollerblading and talked about music that she loved, and was just like not the type of person that you pictured doing something like this. Like Tracy, you look at him, you're like, okay. But this little girl, you're like, which is, I think, why people are so interested in this case, those that know about it, because it's like, how did she do this? But she did it, and she admitted to it. So now it was the prosecution's job to convince the jury that she was coerced by Tracy. And that's because even though he didn't pull the trigger, under criminal law, anyone who urges or aids someone to commit a crime can be found guilty of the same crime. Quote. And this quote was from a law professor named Robert Beatty. Tracy's murder trial began February 14th, 2006, so Valentine's Day. And the prosecution's case was basically that Tracy had used Ashley like a weapon to eliminate Sandee before the felony battery trial to ensure that he stayed out of jail. And they had a bunch of witnesses who testified that Tracy had said on a number of occasions that he would do anything to make sure he did not go back to jail. And in addition to that, they had Ashley, and she came to the stand to testify against Tracy. And reportedly, this is the first time she had seen him since they had been arrested. And she was shocked to see just how much he had changed. They both changed a bunch in prison, but in opposite directions. Like, he wasn't able, well, he could probably work out, but he wasn't able to get steroids anymore. So he had shrunk a ton. And she was just shocked to see how skinny he was, because she herself had gained, I think she said, like 30 pounds while in prison. But he had shrunk to this little skinny former version of himself. So apparently, he lost weight, and she had found it. Dun-dun-dun. But anyways, she got on the stand, and she told them everything, dude. She told them about the murder, the other murder attempt, and the lead-up. She told them about how Tracy pressured her and coached her through the murder, and how she just followed what he said. She told them about how he taught her how to load and use the gun, where to ambush Sandee, how to steal her bag to make it look like a robbery, and how she should look into Sandee's eyes to ensure that she was really gone. She said that Tracy told her the two of them should get married before the murder was committed, so that if they did get away with killing Sandee and they were caught, they would not be able to testify against each other. And she told the court that prior to the murder, Tracy had even met with an attorney to confirm that this was true. But, Tracy disagreed. He and his defense team basically said that this was not true, that Ashley did this all on her own, not with his coaching and definitely not with his knowledge. I guess definitely would go for either of those. He's saying he didn't know that she was going to do it and that he didn't help her do it, basically. He said he never told his wife that he hated Sandee and never told his wife that he wanted something bad to happen to Sandee, which I don't believe at all. I'm going to say that right now. I don't believe that at all, because even if he wasn't involved with the murder, which he was, even if he wasn't, if somebody was about to put you in jail for what he did to her, he hates her. And I can't imagine that he'd be silent about that. But that's what he was saying. He said that he never said any of this stuff to Ashley, and that Ashley's actually the one who initially brought up the conversation of something happening, but kind of in a what if situation. That Ashley basically was like, well, what would happen if she didn't show up at trial? And he told her, like, that's what I'm banking on, is that she won't show up at trial. He said that she then asked, like, well, what would happen if, like, somebody stopped her from coming to trial? And he says that at that, he snapped back and told her not even to joke about that. It wasn't funny. And if anything happened to Sandee, he would be the very first person they would look at. He said that he did know that Ashley had gotten the computer software. He was aware of that, but that he thought she was just looking up Sandee because they wanted to get some dirt on her because of the upcoming trial, not to kill her. And he said he didn't know that any of this was happening or that Ashley may be involved until he heard that Sandee was dead. And then he started putting the pieces together in his mind. He said that Ashley was a lot smarter than she seemed and a lot more cunning than people give her credit for. And when it came to her saying that he controlled her, he said that he found that to be laughable because he couldn't even get her to clean their house. And to that I say, I just have an idea for you, Tracy. And that is, why don't you clean it your fucking self? Anyways, the defense asked Ashley on the stand why she had murdered Sandee. And she responded with, quote, because I loved him. The defense attorney responded by snapping back at her saying, quote, everything that happened here is Tracy's fault, right? And she responded with, quote, no, I take complete responsibility for everything, but I never would have done it if I hadn't met him. Do you guys believe her? That's my question to you, the Brat Pack. Do you believe her? Because a lot of people do. Even Sandee's own family believe Ashley, and they were fine with her getting a reduced sentence and taking the deal if that meant they were going to be able to get the real person who was actually responsible for Sandee's death behind bars. Now, it wasn't just Ashley's testimony that police had against Tracy. They also had the cell phone records. Because remember, during her confession, Ashley told police that her and Tracy had been talking like the whole time over the phone, and the cell phone records showed that. They lined up exactly with what she was saying. Now, to explain the records, the phone records, because they couldn't decide what was said on the phone. They couldn't determine that because it was a phone call. It wasn't recorded. And not that they could listen to that anyway, which is a problem that we're going to get to. But anyway, Tracy said that those phone calls had nothing to do with the murder that was happening at the same time the calls were being made. That's just crazy talk. That they were just in the point of their relationship where they just talked all the time. You know, the honeymoon phase, even though they didn't take a honeymoon. They were talking the night of what would have been their honeymoon. And what they were talking about was a prolonged argument about another woman. This is what he's saying. Now, the prosecution did not hold back on Tracy. They called him a liar. They called him a master manipulator. They called him a man who likes to beat women. And for him, he just said that he was a victim. He was the guy who was in the wrong place at the wrong time all the time. A guy who got screwed over by his wife. A woman who just loved him so much that she would kill for him without him even having to ask her to. Which, to add another layer of fucked up to this, she does all this because she loves him so much. I think that part is true regardless, right? Whether he told her to, whether she did it on her own. It was because she was in love or obsessed with him, right? Well, while she's in jail for what she did for him, he is writing other women, including ex-girlfriends, saying how much he loved them and proposing marriage to them. It's just so fucked up. Now, the trial was coming to an end here, and I wish I could have seen this trial. Like, I wish there could have been footage of this, because apparently this prosecutor was just like on top of his game, with one veteran defense attorney saying that the closing arguments the prosecutor gave in this case were the best closing argument they had ever seen. The prosecutor said that this case was about Sandra and how she just wanted to go and have her day in court, but she wasn't able to do that because Tracy had played the judge, the jury, and the executioner, saying specifically, quote, "He pointed a firearm at Sandra Rozzo." The firearm he pointed at Sandra was Ashley Humphrey. The jury was then sent to deliberate, and after just 2.5 hours, they had come back with their decision. Timothy Tracy Humphrey was found guilty of first-degree murder for orchestrating and convincing his wife to kill Sandee Rozzo. Sandee's family smiled through tears as the verdict was read, and Tracy just swallowed real hard. Now, Sandee's family was very relieved to see that he was going to be behind bars. They had had a very difficult time ever since Sandee was killed. I guess prior to her murder, they had tried to convince her to drop the charges against him because they were just worried. They were worried about her. But they said that Sandee had found out, she had found out that he had hurt other women. She had found out that they hadn't done anything. They hadn't reported it. So he was still out there, and she wanted to make sure that he wouldn't hurt anyone else. Her sister said of this, and I quote, "She didn't want anybody else to be a victim of Timothy's. And if she had to die to get him off the street, then that is what she would do." And she added that her sister is a hero. Tracy was asked if he was surprised about the verdict, and he said no. He said as soon as the trial was done and he was sent to nope, he wasn't sent anywhere. As soon as the trial was done and the jury was sent to deliberate, he knew it was over for him. He knew the prosecution had just nailed his ass to the wall and there wasn't anything that he could do about it. So now it was just time for the sentencing, and basically he was going to be getting either the death penalty or life in prison with no parole. And Sandee's family was kind of fine with him getting either because they knew that he was terrified of being in jail. They were like, he was willing to kill Sandee in order to avoid a 10-year prison sentence. So if we can't get the death penalty, I'm totally fine with him spending the rest of his life in his own literal hell. Now, the judge on the case agreed that his own literal hell would be a better punishment for him, literally saying that he thought that life in prison was going to be harsher on Tracy. And with that, a 39-year-old Timothy Tracy Humphrey was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. And he actually ended up getting more time than this. I wasn't sure where in the video to put this, but because it happened while he was in jail. But basically, he ended up getting more time than just that because of a attempted prison escape. Well, he actually did technically escape. So he was in a transport van where they were taking him from one jail to another jail, or they're taking him from A to B. And he got out. He escaped the transport van and he hid in the bushes, in the brush. I don't know why I picture it as a desert. It's Florida. I don't think they have deserts. If you're from Florida, do you have deserts? But he hid in the wilderness for a couple of hours before they found him and rearrested him. And for this, he was given 15 years. So now he's in jail for life plus 15 years. Anyways, 2 weeks after Tracy's trial, Ashley went to her hearing. She had her hearing, and Sandee's family was not present for this. They were fine with her getting the deal that she had gotten, but they didn't feel like they needed to sit by and witness it because they already knew what she was getting in exchange for her testimony anyway. During this hearing, even though it was technically just going to be her sentencing, Ashley did still have to hear some rough things about the how her actions affect other people. Because the judge told her, you have now left a 13-year-old girl with no mother. And then the judge said specifically to her, quote, "Sandra Rozzo's murder was a contract killing for your very misguided view of what love was." With that, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison for the murder of Sandra Rozzo. And when the sentence was read, she sobbed while her attorney rubbed her back. She was then led out of the courtroom to begin her sentence. She was given credit for the 812 days that she served in prison, but she has to serve her entire 25 years without exception. So she was 23 at the time that she was sentenced and is due to be released in 2028 when she is 46 years old. So that's literally right around the corner. Isn't that so fucked up? This is just such a tragic case, to do all of this for a love that did not last, to help keep a man out of jail who's now in jail for the rest of his life anyway, as are you for, 25 years. It's just so frustrating, and Sandee's gone forever. It's just very, very dumb. And we're not even done yet. Don't worry though, there's not that much left. I'm sure you're done listening to my vocal fry. But like always, Tracy did try to appeal his conviction. He was trying to appeal based on his belief that certain evidence should have and was not suppressed at trial in regards to the applicability. Jesus, that word got caught in my throat. The applicability of the husband and wife privilege to cell phone calls. So basically at the trial, when these cell phone records were shown, what they showed was the number of calls that came in, the time that the calls came in, how long they lasted, and where the two people were, like location-wise, at the time that the calls were committed. But they don't say anything about the content of those calls, right? Okay. Still, at trial, Tracy's attorney, like the trial before the appeal, Tracy's attorney tried to tell the judge that these records should not be entered at trial, because of the protection between husband and wife. But because it was just the times and the locations and everything, and not the content, the judge then disagreed and they were admitted at trial. So now he was appealing based on the part of the law that says a spouse has the privilege to refuse to disclose communications made in confidence with the other spouse, basically. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I got a little confusing there, but I think you understand what I'm saying. Now, the appeal was denied, with the appeals court saying that the protection is not there to make it so that the court cannot see that phone calls were made, just so that the content of the phone calls was protected, which is what happened. They couldn't say what happened on the calls. They could just say, these calls happened at this time, and that's real weird because this time was when a murder was happening to someone that you just happen to not want to exist. You know what I mean? And anyways, the protection only would have counted towards the calls that happened after they were married, which was the calls at the time of the murder. But all of the testimony that Ashley gave regarding the planning and the way the gun range and all the other stuff all happened before, so it wasn't protected anyways. So, denied, which I think is good because I definitely think he was involved. I cannot see a scenario out there in which he does not have involvement. But you let me know what you think. The real question here that a lot of people have is Ashley's accountability and her involvement in this murder. Like, was Ashley equally responsible? Which a lot of people say no. They see her as a tragic young woman who was caught up and manipulated by a narcissist who used her to do his bidding, essentially. That she was vulnerable, she was young, and she did some things that she never would have otherwise done. She just said that at the time she didn't want to lose him, and that she didn't realize until they were separated that he really had controlled and brainwashed her so much into doing what he wanted, and that she really wouldn't have done this. And Sandee's family, again, at least for a time, agreed. Maybe they still do. Maybe they still believe her. Sandee's mother has said that she believes that Tracy corrupted Ashley, and that because of Tracy, 2 women lost their lives. Sandee losing hers due to being murdered, and Ashley losing hers due to murdering Sandee when prior to meeting Tracy, she had never gotten into any trouble. But here's the thing. Ashley did do an interview after being arrested after a lot of time had passed, and this was in 2017. This was an interview with Piers Morgan, who is a man that prior to very recently, I didn't have much of an opinion on. And I'm sorry if you love him. I don't know what the general consensus is on Piers Morgan as a person. But I kind of think he's a tool now. Sorry, not sorry. I saw something recently that made me just be like, not interested. But anyways, Ashley did an interview with Piers Morgan for an episode of his show, Killer Women, I think is what it's called. I've watched it before. It's not my favorite. I don't really like to watch true crime shows like that anymore. I found it's so weird. Doing this has changed so much. I thought about it last night. So I'm researching another case and I was watching an episode of one of those shows, you know, and the only reason I did it is because there's interview clips with family members. So I was watching it, but as I was watching it, I was like, I can't even enjoy this like I used to, or be engaged with this like I used to, because it doesn't matter. But anyway, I've watched it like once or twice, but she did an interview on this show. And Piers Morgan said initially when he sat down with her, he was one of those people, right, that just felt so bad for her. But that she said something during this interview that changed his mind. And I think it did that for other people as well. During this interview, she said that it was her, not Tracy, who first brought up the idea of killing Sandee. She said that she brought it up and it just snowballed from there, but that the initial idea was hers. And reportedly, I believe it was one of the police officers, or it might have been a prosecutor, someone in that part of the law, right, said that If this information had come out prior to her hearing, prior to her making her deal, that this case probably would have went very different for her. That if she had admitted that before all of this happened, she probably would have gotten the death penalty. Now, I don't know if I believe that she would have gotten the death penalty because I've mentioned this before, but we see time and time again that young, beautiful women, people have trouble putting young, beautiful women to death, even if they do horrible, horrible things. But when it comes to Ashley, that's kind of the question. Was she an abused, coerced woman who was made to do something she wouldn't normally do? Or is she a cold-blooded killer? And with that, my friends, is the story of the murder of Sandee Rozzo. I hope you found it informative. I hope I gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I just want to thank you for remembering Sandee with me today. Now, considering everything I told you throughout this video, I want to revisit the question of the day. I actually have two for you, and these questions are as follows. Just kidding. Let's try that again. The questions are as follows. 1, who do you believe was the mastermind behind the murder of Sandee? Was it Tracy? Was it Ashley? Were they equally culpable? Like, obviously he has the motive, but she does too. She wants him around. And 2, do you think that Ashley got enough time? Do you think that that deal was the right move? Obviously, if they want to get Tracy, it was the right move, but take that aside. Do you think it was enough time for what you believe her involvement was in this murder? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. I'm very curious to see what you guys say. Now, before you leave, please don't forget to leave me a comment down below with any and all case suggestions you may have. As you know, I have a long list of cases, and whenever you give me a suggestion, I put your name next to it on my list. So if I cover it, I can give you a shout out, just like in this case. I love looking into the cases you guys suggest because they're often cases I haven't heard of or cases that need more coverage. And I know you're filled with great ideas and great taste. Otherwise, you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. But I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my membership and a link to my merch store. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.